know what fascinates me about retirement regrets? It's not the financial ones. It's not the missed investments or the bad decisions about Social Security timing. It's the quieter ones. The ones nobody warns you about until you're already living inside them. The regrets that don't show up on a spreadsheet but show up in your chest, late at night when the house is quiet and your mind starts wandering. These are the regrets retirees rarely share at family dinners. The ones they keep tucked away, partly out of pride, partly because they don't have the words for them yet. And the strange thing is, almost every retiree I've talked to has at least one, sometimes two, sometimes all five. So today, I want to walk you through them, not to scare you, not to make you feel behind, but to give you the kind of honest look at retirement that most people don't get until it's too late to course correct. And if you're still working, still planning, still wondering if you're doing this right, this might just be the most important conversation you have this year. Let me say something before we go any further. If you're watching this and you feel a knot forming in your stomach, that's okay. That feeling means you care. It means you're paying attention. And paying attention is the first step to making sure these regrets never become yours. Quick pause. If you're new here, hit subscribe. I've got a lot more of these waiting for you. Videos that talk about retirement the way it actually feels, not the way the brochures describe it. Now let's get into it. The first regret almost nobody talks about is this. They wish they had stopped measuring themselves against everyone else. Let me tell you about two people I know. Their names are Patricia and Ruth. Both retired around the same time, both in their mid-60s, both healthy, both married, both living quiet lives in modest homes they paid off years ago. Patricia worked as a nurse for 37 years. She saved around $210,000 in her retirement accounts. Not a fortune by today's standards. Her pension brings in about $1,400 a month. Social Security adds another $2,100. Her husband gets his own check too. Together they pull in just over $5,000 a month, guaranteed every month for the rest of their lives. Ruth, on the other hand, was an accountant. She and her husband saved aggressively. They have just over $900,000 in their portfolio, no pension, just Social Security and their investments. On paper, Ruth looks like the winner, the big number, the impressive total, the kind of figure that gets nods at dinner parties. But here's what nobody sees. Patricia sleeps soundly every night. She doesn't check the market. She doesn't worry about a crash. Her income shows up. Her bills get paid. Her life keeps moving. Ruth, with all her wealth, wakes up at 3 a.m. checking her phone. She watches financial news the way some people watch the weather before a storm. Patricia may already have what people with millions are searching for. And Ruth has spent the last 4 years of her retirement quietly stressed, comparing herself to friends with more, worrying about friends with less, always measuring, always calculating, always anxious, always wondering if she should have done something different. That's the first regret. Spending years comparing your retirement to other people's retirement, looking at your neighbor's RV, looking at your sister's beach house, looking at the couple at church who travels every other month, and quietly believing that you didn't do enough, when in reality, you may have built something stronger than all of them. Because retirement isn't a competition. It never was, and the people who treat it like one tend to be the most miserable retirees on the block, the ones who treat it like their own private chapter, with their own rules, their own pace, their own definition of enough. Those are the ones who actually enjoy it. Those are the ones who sleep well at night. Now think of it this way. Your retirement income is like the foundation of your house, strong, underground, invisible, but holding everything up. Your savings, that's more like the furniture. You can rearrange the furniture, you can upgrade the furniture, but if the foundation is solid, the house stands. If the foundation is shaky, no amount of fancy furniture can save it. Patricia has a solid foundation. Ruth has fancy furniture sitting on uncertain ground. And every single day, that difference shows up in how they feel, how they sleep, how they show up for their grandkids. The number on a statement doesn't decide your peace. The income that hits your account every month that decides your peace. That's the part most people learn too late. The second regret cuts even deeper. So many retirees wish they had claimed their identity sooner. And I don't mean that in some abstract philosophical way. I mean it in a very practical, very emotional way. Most people spend 40 years being defined by what they do. The teacher, the factory worker, the manager, the nurse, the accountant, the plumber, the driver, the salesperson. Their job becomes their answer to who am I? And then one day, they retire. The job ends. The title disappears. The colleagues stop calling. And suddenly there's this hollow space where their identity used to live. Many retirees describe the first year of retirement as some of the strangest months of their adult lives. Strange in ways they didn't expect at all. They have time, but they don't know what to do with it. They have freedom, but they don't know how to use it. They have nothing pulling at them, and somehow that feels worse than the years when everything was pulling at them. This is the regret nobody warns you about, the regret of waiting until retirement to figure out who you are outside of work. The retirees who handle this best are the ones who started building their non-work identity years before they retired. They had hobbies, they had volunteer commitments, they had relationships outside the office. They had a sense of self that wasn't tied to a paycheck or a title. And when retirement came, they didn't lose themselves. They just changed gears. They simply kept living. But the ones who didn't, the ones who poured everything into their career and assumed retirement would magically deliver meaning, they struggle. Some of them quietly, some of them loudly. Some of them through depression, through arguments with their spouse, through a strange restlessness they can't quite name. They wish they had started earlier. They wish someone had warned them. Let me ask you something. Have you ever thought about what your ideal retirement day actually looks like? Not the numbers, just the feeling. What does it sound like? What does it smell like? Who's there? What are you doing at 10 in the morning? At 2 in the afternoon? At 7 at night? If you can't picture it clearly, that's worth paying attention to right now, because the people who picture it clearly tend to live it more fully, and the people who don't picture it, they tend to drift. They wake up in retirement and wonder why it doesn't feel the way the commercials promised. The commercials show beaches and golf courses. They don't show the quiet Tuesday afternoon. They don't show the hour after lunch when the house feels too big. That Tuesday afternoon, when your spouse is at the doctor and your kids are at work and your phone hasn't rung in 6 hours and you don't know what to do with yourself. That's the moment retirement gets real. That's the moment your identity either holds or it doesn't. And the people who built that identity early, they handle it. The people who didn't, they drift, sometimes for years. That's the regret. Not building an identity that could carry you across the bridge from working life to retired life. Not realizing that you needed something to retire to, not just something to retire from. And by the time most people realize this, they're already 3 or 4 years in, trying to figure it out the hard way, trying to rebuild themselves from scratch. The third regret is one that quietly devastates more retirees than people realize. They wish they had been honest about expenses. Now this one is sneaky, because most people think they have a handle on their expenses. They look at their budget. They know what their mortgage is. They know what their car payment is. They have a rough idea of groceries and utilities. But retirement expenses don't behave the way working expenses behave. They shift. They surprise you. They show up in places you didn't plan for. Healthcare costs creep up. Home repairs creep up. Helping the grandkids creeps up. Travel, even modest travel, creeps up. Property taxes nudge higher. Insurance premiums climb. And the worst part is, inflation doesn't care about your budget. Inflation is like an ice cube in the sun. It doesn't melt all at once. It creeps, it nudges, it slowly raises the cost of everything around you. Your groceries, your insurance, your healthcare, your utilities, year after year, quietly, almost invisibly. You barely notice it from one month to the next. But stretch that out over 15, 20, 25 years of retirement, and suddenly the gap between what you planned for and what life actually costs becomes a canyon. A lot of retirees realize this too late. They built a plan based on what their life cost in the year they retired. They didn't model out what it would cost 10 years later, or 15 years later, or 20 years later. They didn't ask the harder question, the more uncomfortable question, the one that separates a good plan from a sturdy one, the question that most advisors don't even ask. And that question is, what happens to my plan in year 15, not year 1? Because year 1 usually looks fine. Year 1 usually feels exciting. You've got energy, you've got savings, you've got a paycheck, still echoing in your account. But year 15 is where the cracks show. Year 15 is where the inflation has done its quiet work. Year 15 is where regret moves in if you didn't plan for it. The retirees who avoid this regret are the ones who planned for inflation honestly. They didn't pretend it would stay at 2% forever. They didn't assume their expenses would magically stay flat. They built in cushion. They built in flexibility. They built in income streams that adjusted with cost of living. And because of that, year 15 for them looks a lot like year 1, maybe even better, maybe even more relaxed. This is also why Social Security timing matters more than most people give it credit for. because Social Security comes with cost of living adjustments built in. It moves with inflation. It quietly grows over time. And when you claim it earlier, you lock in a lower base that those adjustments multiply against for the rest of your life. When you wait, you lock in a higher base, and those same adjustments work harder for you every single year, for decades, quietly compounding into a meaningful difference. Most people don't think about this when they decide when to claim. They think about today. They think about how tired they are. They think about how much they want to stop working. They don't think about the 79-year-old version of themselves who will be living on whatever decision they made at 62. The fourth regret is the one I wish more couples would talk about before retirement, not after. It's the regret of not preparing for the day when one spouse is gone. I know, that's a hard sentence to read. It's an even harder reality to plan for. Most couples avoid this conversation. They dance around it. They mention it in passing. They make jokes about it. But they don't sit down and actually talk about it. And then one day, the unthinkable happens. One spouse passes. The other one is left with grief, paperwork, and a financial reality that nobody prepared them for. Because when one spouse passes, the financial landscape changes in ways most people don't expect. One Social Security check disappears. Sometimes a pension reduces significantly, depending on the survivor election that was made decades earlier. The surviving spouse is often left with less income, but most of the same fixed expenses. The house still needs the same heat. The property taxes don't shrink because one person is gone. The insurance bills don't drop in half. The utilities are roughly the same. And in the middle of grief, in the middle of the worst emotional moment of someone's life, they suddenly have to navigate financial decisions they were never prepared to make. Tom and Steve, two retired school teachers I met years apart, both told me the same thing about their wives. They said the worst conversation they ever had with their wives was the one where they finally talked about what would happen if one of them went first. The strange thing? They both said it was also the most loving conversation they ever had. Because once they got past the discomfort, something shifted between them. They worked through the numbers, they made the choices about pension survivor benefits and life insurance and account beneficiaries. They walked through what bills would still be there, what income would disappear, what changes the surviving spouse would face. And something shifted between them. They weren't avoiding the future anymore. They were preparing for it together. They were protecting each other in the most practical way two people can. And both of them said the same thing in different words. They wish they had done it 10 years earlier. They wish they hadn't waited until retirement was around the corner. Because the earlier you have this conversation, the more options you have. The longer you wait, the fewer levers you can pull. And the fewer levers you can pull, the more your surviving spouse has to absorb alone. Here's a question for the married folks. Have you and your spouse ever actually talked about what happens if one of you is gone? Not in a morbid way, not in a fearful way, in a practical, loving, protective way. Because if you haven't, you're not alone. Most couples haven't. But the ones who do, they end up with stronger marriages and stronger retirements. They end up with peace where other couples have anxiety. And here's something else worth saying. This conversation isn't just about money. It's about dignity. It's about making sure the person you love most in this world doesn't have to make panicked decisions in the worst week of their life. It's about leaving them a clear path, a clear plan, a clear set of accounts they understand. That's not paperwork. That's love expressed in spreadsheets. The fifth regret might be the most universal of all, and it's the one I want to spend the most time on because it touches everything else. So many retirees wish they had focused on income, not just savings. They wish someone had told them 20 or 30 years earlier that the size of the number in their account matters less than the size of the check that hits their bank account every month. The real question isn't how much have I saved, it's how much income can I guarantee for the rest of my life. Those are two completely different questions, and they lead to two completely different retirements. The savings question creates anxiety. The income question creates peace. The savings question makes you watch the market. The income question makes you live your life. That difference is everything. Let me explain. I want you to imagine your retirement in two parts. Not one big number, two distinct piles. Pile one is income that shows up no matter what. Social Security, pensions, annuities, anything that guarantees a check every month for the rest of your life. Pile two is your savings. Investments, retirement accounts, the money that fluctuates with the market. money that rises and falls without asking. Pile 1 is the foundation. It's the floor under your feet. It tells you what your minimum monthly life can look like, even if everything else goes wrong. Pile 2 is the upside. It's the cushion. It's the bonus. It's the freedom money, the travel money, the help the grandkids money. But it should never be the foundation. It can't be, because the market doesn't ask permission before it drops. The retirees who get this right structure their retirement so that pile 1 covers their essential expenses, their mortgage or rent if they have one, their utilities, their food, their insurance, their basic transportation, the non-negotiables, the bills that show up whether the market is up or down. If pile 1 can cover those, you have what's called an income floor. And an income floor changes everything. It changes how you sleep. It changes how you make decisions. It changes how you handle a market downturn. Because when the market drops 20% and your friend Karen is panicking, you're not. Your essential expenses are still covered. Your floor is still solid. The drop in your investments? That's affecting pile 2, the upside, not the foundation. And the upside can wait. The upside can recover. The foundation just has to hold. But here's where the regret kicks in. So many retirees built their retirement around pile 2 and ignored pile 1. They focused on the savings number. They chased the big total. They were told by everyone, friends, neighbors, even some advisors, that they needed $1 million, $2 million, some giant target. And they spent their entire working life chasing that number without ever asking the more important question. What does my monthly income actually look like? What's my floor? What hits my account no matter what happens in the world? And so they arrive at retirement with a big number but a soft floor, and the first market downturn rattles them to their bones. They start questioning every decision. They start cutting back on things they don't need to cut back on. They start living small lives inside what should have been a big retirement. Let me ask you something. Do you know what your monthly income will actually look like when you retire? Be honest with yourself. Most people don't. Most people know the total in their accounts, but they have no idea what that total translates to in monthly income. And if you don't know that, you don't really know your retirement. You know your wealth. You don't know your life. This is also why Social Security claiming decisions matter so much. Think of your benefit like a faucet. Behind that faucet is a pipe, one you've been filling your entire working life. Every paycheck, every tax contribution, it all builds pressure in that pipe. And the longer you wait to turn the faucet on, up to a point, the harder that water flows out. The more income you get every month for life. If you turn it on at 62, you're getting a thinner stream. If you turn it on at full retirement age, around 67 for most people, the stream gets stronger. And if you can wait until 70, that stream gets even stronger. Roughly 8% more for every year you delay past full retirement age. That's an increase that lasts the rest of your life, with cost of living adjustments stacked on top of it. And if you wait too long to turn it on, well, you've waited too long. You can't claim past 70 and keep gaining. The growth stops. So the question becomes not just when can I claim, but when does it make the most sense for my income floor? For some people, claiming early is the right answer. For others, waiting is the right answer. There's no universal rule. There's only the question of fit. But the regret comes when people claim without thinking. They claim because they're tired of working. They claim because they need the money. They claim because their friend claimed. They claim because they don't trust the system. And then they spend the rest of their retirement on a thinner stream than they could have had. And that thinner stream gets multiplied by every cost of living adjustment for decades. Quietly, silently. The difference compounds. The retiree who claimed at 62 might be getting $1,400 a month. The same person with the same work history who waited until 70 might be getting $2,500 a month. That's an $1,100 a month difference. That's over $13,000 a year, every year, for decades. That's a real number with real consequences. Now, I'm not saying everyone should wait. I'm saying everyone should think. Everyone should run the numbers. Everyone should look at their health, their family longevity, their other income sources, their spouse's situation before they pull the trigger. Because once you claim, you can't undo it easily. The decision becomes permanent very quickly, and permanent decisions deserve more than tired thinking. Here's a thought. If the system only rewards you with almost enough, you will spend your entire life chasing more. How does that make you feel? Because that's what a lot of retirees describe. They feel like they did everything right, saved what they could, worked hard, played by the rules, and still ended up feeling like they were chasing, always reaching, always wondering if they had enough. And that feeling, that chasing feeling, it comes from focusing on the wrong number. It comes from looking at the big total instead of the monthly income. It comes from comparing yourself to people who, behind the scenes, are also chasing. It comes from a system that quietly trained you to think savings, 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 when the real game was always income, income, income. The frame was wrong from the start. So let's talk about what you can actually do with all this. Because regret only matters if it teaches you something. And these 5 regrets, they teach you a lot. The first thing you can do is stop comparing. Stop measuring yourself against other people's retirement. You don't know their numbers. You don't know their stress level. You don't know their income floor. And honestly, neither do they, most of the time. The second thing you can do is start building your identity outside of work right now while you still have time. If you're 5 years from retirement, that's plenty of time. If you're 10 years out, even better. Pick up a hobby. Reconnect with an old friend. Join something. Volunteer somewhere. Build relationships and interests that aren't connected to your paycheck, so that when the paycheck ends, your sense of self doesn't end with it. The third thing you can do is be brutally honest about your expenses, not just today's expenses, the expenses you'll have in year 15 of retirement. Inflate them by a reasonable amount. Build in cushion. Plan for the surprises. Plan for the home repair you can't predict, the medical event you can't predict, the family member who might need help. Because expenses don't shrink in retirement. They shift, they evolve, they grow. The fourth thing you can do is have the conversation with your spouse, the one nobody wants to have, the what happens if one of us is gone conversation. Look at the survivor benefits on your pension. Look at your Social Security strategy as a couple. Look at your insurance. Look at the accounts and who's named on them. And do it now, while both of you are clear, healthy, and able to make decisions together, while you still have time on your side. The fifth thing you can do, and maybe the most important, is shift your focus from savings to income. Take your total savings and figure out what monthly income it can produce safely. Add that to your Social Security. Add any pension. Add any other guaranteed income. That's your real number, not the total in your accounts. The monthly income you can actually live on. That's the number that matters more than any other. If this resonating with you so far, I'd love for you to subscribe. I make videos like this one on a regular basis. Honest videos, quiet videos. Videos that don't sell you anything, but try to give you a clearer picture of what retirement really looks like. And the more clarity you build now, the fewer regrets you'll carry later, the fewer surprises you'll meet in year 15. I want to come back to Patricia and Ruth for a minute, because their story matters here. Patricia, with her $210,000, has something Ruth doesn't have. She has clarity. She knows what her income is. She knows what her expenses are. She knows where her floor is. She doesn't think about money the way Ruth does. She thinks about her grandkids. She thinks about her garden. She thinks about the trip she and her husband are planning to take this fall. Ruth, with her $900,000, thinks about money constantly. Not because she's greedy, not because she's bad with money, but because her plan was built on a foundation that can shift. The market can move. Her portfolio can drop. Her income can fluctuate, and every fluctuation pulls her attention away from her life and into her statements, away from her family and into her phone. It's not about who has more saved, it's about who has more certainty. Patricia has certainty. Ruth has wealth. And if you ask either of them which they'd rather have, both of them, deep down, would say certainty. Because certainty is what lets you live. Wealth without certainty is just a number you keep checking. Certainty is freedom you actually feel, freedom you don't have to calculate every morning. And this is where the system has quietly failed a lot of people. It trained them to chase the wrong target. It trained them to focus on the accumulation phase and assume the distribution phase would just work itself out. It trained them to think bigger is better, when in reality, more predictable is better. More guaranteed is better. More aligned with your actual monthly life is better. More boring is better. The savings approach is loud. It's flashy. It gets headlines. It gets articles. It gets people excited. The income approach is quiet. It doesn't trend. It doesn't sell as many books. But it's the approach that produces the most peaceful retirements, the ones where people aren't checking their accounts every morning, the ones where people are actually living their retirement instead of monitoring it. living it instead of managing it. And here's the thing about regret. Regret usually doesn't show up at the beginning. It shows up in the middle. Year 5, year 7, year 10 of retirement. It shows up when you realize you should have started this conversation with your spouse a decade ago. It shows up when you realize you should have built an identity outside of work before you walked away from it. It shows up when you realize you should have been planning for year 15, not just year 1. And by then, your options are smaller. Your levers are fewer. Your time is shorter. That's why I'm having this conversation with you now, while you still have time. Whether you're 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out, this is the time. Not later, not when you feel ready. Because feeling ready is something that comes from doing the work, not from waiting for it to arrive. Let me leave you with this. You don't need perfection to have a successful retirement. You don't need to get everything exactly right. What you need is awareness, clarity, and the willingness to face the real numbers so you can make real decisions. Because when you understand your income, when you understand your expenses, when you understand how your plan holds up over time, something changes inside you. You feel more in control, more confident, more at ease. And that feeling, that control, that ease, it doesn't come from having a giant pile of money. It comes from understanding. It comes from preparation. It comes from having had the hard conversations early instead of avoiding them until late. It comes from defining your retirement on your terms, not on the world's terms, not on your neighbor's terms, not on the financial industry's terms, on yours, only yours. The retirees who carry the fewest regrets are not the ones with the biggest portfolios. They're the ones with the clearest plans. They're the ones who built income, not just savings. They're the ones who had the conversations. They're the ones who started their identity work years before retirement, not in the middle of their first year staring out the window wondering what to do next. So if you take anything from today, take this. Audit your income, not just your savings. Have the conversations you've been avoiding. Picture your retirement day, not your retirement number. Build a foundation that holds. Build an identity that travels with you. And stop measuring yourself against people whose plans you don't actually understand, whose stress you can't see, whose nights you don't share. Because at the end of the day, retirement isn't a contest. It's a chapter, maybe the longest, most important chapter of your life. And the people who write it best are the ones who pay attention to the quiet things, the income, the clarity, the relationships, the identity, the simple math of a guaranteed check that shows up every month, no matter what the market does that week. You are not behind. You may not be ahead either, but the position you're in right now, wherever that is, has more possibility than you realize. The work you do in the next year, the conversations you have, the decisions you make, those can shift everything. They can turn a future of regret into a future of peace. They can turn anxiety into confidence. They can turn chasing into choosing. And peace, that's the real prize. Not a $1 million account, not a beach house, not a vacation calendar packed with trips. Peace, the kind that comes from knowing your floor is solid, from knowing your spouse is protected, from knowing your identity is your own, from knowing your income covers your life. That kind of peace doesn't show up by accident. You build it, quietly, one decision at a time, one conversation at a time, one honest number at a time. Think about that for a second. Every retiree you've ever admired, the ones who seemed calm, the ones who seemed content, they didn't get there by luck. They got there by paying attention to things most people ignore. They got there by asking better questions. They got there by being willing to look at their numbers honestly, even when those numbers were uncomfortable, especially when those numbers were uncomfortable. And every retiree you've ever pitied, the ones who seemed anxious, the ones who seemed restless, they didn't end up there by accident either. They ended up there by avoiding the hard conversations, by chasing the wrong numbers, by assuming the system would protect them. The difference between those two groups isn't luck. It isn't income level. It isn't even savings. It's awareness. It's clarity. It's willingness to look honestly. So whatever stage you're in right now, whatever your number looks like, whatever your monthly income is, please hear this. You still have time. You still have decisions in front of you. You still have a voice in how this chapter unfolds. Don't give that away. Don't outsource it to fear. Don't outsource it to comparison. Don't outsource it to whatever the financial industry tells you the right number should be. Sit down with your spouse. Sit down with your numbers. Sit down with your future self, the 80-year-old version of you that's depending on the decisions the current version of you makes today. Ask the real questions, not what's my total, what's my monthly income, not when can I retire, when can I retire well, Not how much have I saved? How much can I count on, no matter what happens? Those are the questions that build retirements without regrets. Those are the questions that build the kind of life where you wake up in year 15, look around, and realize you got it right. Not perfect, just right. Right enough to enjoy, right enough to relax, right enough to stop chasing and start living the years you worked so hard to reach. If this video helped you see your retirement in a new way, hit that subscribe button. I've got a lot more where this came from, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care of yourself. Take care of your spouse, have the hard conversations, run the real numbers, and remember, you don't need more money to have a better retirement. You need more clarity. And clarity, that's something you can start building today, right now, in the next quiet moment you give yourself to think.